What are you doing with that food?
The voice came from Victor Hale, head of operations, corner office, the kind of man who never learned a janitor's name.
It's just the leftovers, sir. They're throwing it away.
So you help yourself? Like some stray dog dragging scraps home?
Please. Nobody wants it.
You just what? Beg?
That's what you people do, isn't it? Anything free, you grab with both hands.
Sir, I'm only asking for what's left.
What's left humiliating is trash. And you're down here picking through it like you were born in a dumpster.
Not one said a word. She zipped her bag shut, picked it up, walked out with the same limp she'd carried for 11 years. Every night, same leftovers, same silence, until the CEO of that building followed her home and realized those leftovers were never for her. At 10:47 on a Tuesday night, Garrett Collins stood in the darkened hallway of the 32nd floor and watched a woman steal food. Not steal, that wasn't the right word, but he didn't have a better one yet. The cleaning lady, mid-50s, gray hair twisted into a low bun, sneakers so worn the soles had gone smooth, moved through the executive cafeteria with a purpose that had nothing to do with cleaning. She wiped down the granite counters first, mopped the floor in even, unhurried strokes, pushed each chair flush against the table. Then she turned to the catering trays left over from the evening leadership meeting. Her hands worked quickly. Turkey wraps went into a Ziploc bag, fruit cups stacked into a reusable container, dinner rolls, still soft, wrapped in paper napkins and tucked into a faded canvas tote that had been washed so many times the print had dissolved into nothing. She checked every tray. Nothing wasted, nothing rushed. She handled a bruised pear like it was something precious. Set it gently on top of the rolls so it wouldn't get crushed. Garrett leaned against the doorframe. He'd come back for his laptop. That was the only reason he was still here, the only reason he saw her at all. A security guard passed behind him, nodded toward the cafeteria. "She does that every night," he said, half a grin on his face. "Every single night. Only thing she ever asked for in 11 years. The leftovers." 11 years. Garrett turned that number over in his head. He didn't respond. He watched her zip the canvas bag, sling it over one shoulder, and push her cart toward the service elevator. She walked with a slight limp. Left leg. Barely noticeable unless you were paying attention. He was paying attention. The elevator doors closed. The floor went quiet. Garrett picked up his laptop from the conference table and stood there for a moment in the empty cafeteria. The catering trays were spotless. Not a crumb left. She'd taken everything that would have hit the trash by morning. He thought about the $800 dinner he'd expensed last Thursday. The wine alone cost more than her weekly paycheck. He told himself it was nothing. A woman taking home leftovers. People did that. It meant nothing. But he came back the next night, and the night after that. And what he found changed everything. By 7 the next morning, Garrett Collins was back in his corner office on the 32nd floor. Freshly pressed suit, Italian leather shoes, a coffee his assistant had waiting before he stepped off the elevator. The morning moved the way every morning moved. A board call at 8, quarterly projections at 9, a profile interview with Forbes at 10. They wanted to talk about his leadership philosophy. He gave them the answers they expected. Vision, grit, innovation. Words that looked good in pull quotes and meant nothing to the woman mopping floors 6 stories below. Garrett ran a 12,000-person tech company. Valuation, $2.3 billion. He'd built it from a garage in Ridgemont with a maxed-out credit card and a business plan written on napkins. That story had been told so many times it barely felt like his anymore. Journalists loved it. Investors loved it. He'd stopped feeling anything about it years ago. His penthouse sat 40 floors above downtown. A driver took him everywhere. A personal chef stocked his fridge with things he never finished. High-protein meals in glass containers that went untouched for days. When the chef cleared them out each Friday, Garrett never asked where they went. He never asked where anything went. That afternoon, he stayed late for a merger review. The conference room still smelled like catered lunch. Rosemary chicken, roasted vegetables, artisan bread. The trays sat half full. By 6 o'clock, the caterers would dump everything. His executive assistant, Laura, poked her head in. "Anything else before I leave?" "How much food do we waste?" She blinked. "Excuse me?" "The company, per week, how much food do we throw away?" Laura pulled it up on her tablet. Roughly 400 pounds per week across all 3 cafeterias. 400 pounds. Every week. 52 weeks a year. Garrett leaned back in his chair and stared at the half-empty tray of rosemary chicken going cold on the credenza. He thought about the cleaning lady, the way she wrapped each roll in a napkin, how she stacked the fruit cups by size, the care she took with a bruised pear. Like it mattered. Like someone was counting on it. Down in the service corridors, the night shift was starting. He could hear the distant rattle of cleaning carts rolling across tile. The day staff had gone home. The building belonged to a different crew now. Invisible, nameless, interchangeable. That's how the company saw them. That's how he'd always seen them. He pulled up the employee directory and typed, Ashford. One result. Wendy Ashford. Custodial staff, night shift. Hired 11 years ago. Emergency contact, none. Insurance claims, 0. Complaints, 0. Requests, 0. Except one. The leftovers. In 11 years, the only thing she'd ever asked for was food that was going in the trash. He scrolled through her file looking for something. A story, a reason, a detail that would explain what he'd seen last night. There was nothing. No family listed. No address update. No photograph. Just a name and a start date and 11 years of silence. He closed the laptop, walked to the window. 32 floors below, the city was lighting up for the evening. Restaurants, bars, apartment towers glowing warm and full. Somewhere out there, Wendy Ashford was on a bus, heading to work, carrying an empty canvas bag she'd fill with food nobody else wanted. He pressed his forehead against the glass and stayed there until the cafeteria lights went dark. That night, Garrett didn't go home. He told himself it was the merger, told himself the numbers needed one more pass. But at 9:15, he turned off his desk lamp, walked to the glass wall of his office, and waited. She arrived at her usual time, 6 sharp. Cart first, then the mop bucket, then her. Same gray bun, same worn sneakers, same canvas bag folded flat and tucked under the cart's bottom shelf. She started on the east wing. Desks first, then floors, then wastebaskets. A system. Every night identical. By 9:40, she reached the executive cafeteria. Garrett stood behind the tinted glass of the conference room across the hall, close enough to hear the soft clatter of aluminum trays being opened, close enough to watch. She didn't grab, she sorted. Proteins went into one container. Sliced turkey, grilled chicken strips, cubes of cheese. Bread went into a separate bag. Rolls, croissants, slices of sourdough, each one wrapped in a napkin to keep it soft. Fruit was separated by ripeness. The firm apples in one stack, the softer ones on top where they wouldn't bruise. Vegetables, cherry tomatoes, carrot sticks, celery, into a third container, layered with damp paper towels. This wasn't scavenging, this was meal prep, organized, intentional, like she was feeding a household. He stepped out. Evening. She flinched, turned around fast, one hand still holding a container of strawberries. When she saw who it was, her shoulders pulled in tight. Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't know anyone was still here. I work late sometimes. He nodded at the trays. That's a lot of food for one person. She looked at the containers lined up on the counter, then back at him. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. A wall going up. It's not for one person, sir. The words sat in the air between them. Garrett waited. She didn't offer more. She placed the strawberries in the bag, sealed each container with a quiet click, and stacked them inside the canvas tote. She moved the way she always moved. Efficient, careful, invisible. Who's it for? He asked. She paused with her hand on the bag's zipper. Didn't look up. People who need it. She zipped the bag, lifted it onto her shoulder, the right one keeping the weight off her left leg. Placed the mop back on the cart. Pushed it toward the service elevator without another word. The elevator doors opened. She stepped in, turned around to face forward. For 1 second, their eyes met across the empty hallway. Then the doors closed. Garrett stood in the cafeteria alone. The trays were clean, every container empty, not a single grape left behind. The only evidence she'd been there was the faint smell of industrial cleaner and the absence of food that should have been in the trash by now. People who need it. Not my family, not my kids, not my roommates. People who need it. Like she was running some kind of operation out of her home. Like the leftovers weren't a convenience. They were a supply chain. He picked up his phone, put it back down, picked it up again. The question had teeth now. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was something heavier. Something that followed him to his car, sat in the passenger seat, and rode with him all the way home. Who is she feeding? He came back the next night, and the night after that. For 2 weeks straight, Garrett Collins, a man who hadn't stayed past 7 in 3 years, became a fixture on the 32nd floor after dark. He kept his office lights off, worked by the glow of his laptop, ate dinner at his desk from the same cafeteria trays Wendy would visit hours later. He watched her the way you'd study a system you couldn't reverse engineer, looking for the logic, the pattern, the thing that made it all make sense. By the third night, he noticed the limp was worse in cold weather. She'd pause at the end of a hallway, shift her weight to her right leg, and press her palm flat against her left hip. Just for a second, then keep moving. She never sat down. Not once in 6 hours. By the 5th night, he noticed her hands, cracked at the knuckles, dry and rough from years of chemical cleaners. But steady, always steady. She could wrap a bread roll in a napkin with one hand while stacking containers with the other. Her efficiency was surgical. By the 8th night, he noticed the humming, low and soft, old hymns, the kind you'd hear in a small-town church on a Sunday morning. She hummed while she mopped, hummed while she wiped down conference tables, stopped humming when she reached the cafeteria. The food was serious business. No sound, no wasted motion, just hands working fast. He went to HR on a Tuesday afternoon. I need the full file on Wendy Ashford, custodial, night shift. The HR director, a woman named Sandra Price, looked at him like he'd asked for the moon. The cleaning lady? Her file, everything you have. It was thin. 2 pages. Name, social. Start date, 11 years ago. Emergency contact, none listed. Next of kin, blank. Insurance, basic company plan, never used. Performance reviews, satisfactory, satisfactory, satisfactory. 11 straight years of the same word. No promotions, no raises beyond the annual cost of living bump. No complaints filed, no complaints received. And one note, handwritten in the margin of her original application. Only request, permission to take leftover catering food at end of shift. Approved. 11 years. One request, approved, and never revisited. Garrett slid the file back across Sandra's desk. What do you know about her? Sandra shrugged. She's quiet, shows up, does her job, doesn't cause problems. That's it? What else is there? She's a janitor, Garrett. He let that sit, didn't respond to it, walked out. That evening, he called down to the cafeteria manager, a man named Doug who'd been running food services for 6 years. The leftover food, what happens to it? Trash, Doug said. End of every night. Whatever's not eaten goes in the bins. All of it? Well, not all of it. The cleaning lady takes some. Some? Doug scratched his jaw. Okay, a lot. She takes a lot. But it's going in the trash anyway, so nobody cares. I care. Starting tomorrow, I want the evening trays packed properly before they go out. Better containers. Keep the food separated. And put it in the cold storage unit instead of leaving it on the counter. Doug stared at him. You want me to prep the leftovers? For the cleaning lady? I want you to stop treating good food like garbage. Can you do that? Doug did it. That night, Garrett watched from his office as Wendy opened the cold storage unit and found the food already packed, sorted, labeled, sealed in proper containers instead of scattered across aluminum trays. She stood very still, looked around the cafeteria, checked the hallway. No one there, or so she thought. Her hand came up to her mouth, just for a moment. Then she lowered it, placed every container into her bag with the same careful precision she always used, and pushed her cart to the elevator. But right before the doors closed, he saw something he hadn't seen in 2 weeks of watching. She smiled, small, brief, gone before the doors shut all the way. But it was there. Garrett sat back in his chair and made a decision he'd been circling for 14 nights. Tomorrow he was going to follow her home. 11:15, Thursday night. Wendy Ashford clocked out at the service entrance on the building's east side. Badge scanned, cart parked, canvas bag over her right shoulder, heavier tonight. The cold storage containers were bigger than the old aluminum scraps. She walked 3 blocks east to the bus stop on Garfield Avenue. No bench. Just a sign and a street light with a flicker that made the sidewalk pulse orange every few seconds. She stood under it, weight on her right leg, bag resting against her hip. Garrett sat in his car across the street. Engine off, lights off. He felt ridiculous. A billionaire in a Tesla, parked in the dark, watching a cleaning lady wait for a bus. If anyone on his board could see him right now, they'd call an emergency session. The Route 9 bus arrived at 11:40, brakes hissing, doors folding open. Wendy climbed the steps slowly. The limp was worse at the end of a 6-hour shift. She fed coins into the machine. Not a transit card, coins. One by one. Garrett pulled out behind the bus and followed. The route went south, first through the financial district. Glass towers, valets, couples leaving restaurants with $200 tabs. Then the mid-city corridor, strip malls, check-cashing stores, a laundromat still lit at midnight. Then further south, past the highway overpass where the streetlights started to thin out and the buildings got lower and the sidewalks cracked wider. Millbrook. He'd heard the name. Everyone in the city had. It showed up in news segments about crime statistics and school closures and water main breaks that took weeks to fix. The kind of neighborhood people drove through with their doors locked and their eyes straight ahead. Wendy got off at a stop with no shelter and no light. Just a metal pole with a faded Route 9 sign bolted to it. She stepped onto the curb and started walking. Garrett parked 2 blocks behind and followed on foot. The streets were narrow, potholes deep enough to swallow a tire, porches sagging under the weight of years nobody had paid to fix. A dog barked from behind a chain-link fence. Somewhere a television played through an open window, canned laughter from a show that sounded 20 years old. Wendy walked with purpose. She knew every crack in this sidewalk, every uneven step. She turned left on Mayhew, right on Dawson, left again on Birch Lane, a dead-end street with 6 houses, 3 of them dark, 2 of them boarded up. The last one had a light on. It was small. Single-story clapboard, white paint peeling off in long strips. A porch that tilted slightly to the left, held up by a 2x4 wedged under the corner beam. The front yard was dirt and weeds except for one patch. A small garden, maybe 6 feet square, with tomato cages and what looked like herbs growing in coffee cans. A hand-painted sign hung from the porch railing, but Garrett was too far away to read it in the dark. Wendy climbed the porch steps, 3 of them, and the middle one groaned loud enough that he heard it from 50 feet away. She shifted the bag to her other shoulder, took out her keys. The door opened. Light spilled across the porch. Warm light. Yellow. The kind that comes from old lamps with fabric shades, not overhead fluorescents. And then Garrett heard something that made him stop walking, stop breathing, stop everything. Children laughing. Not one child, not 2. A chorus of small voices, giggling, talking over each other, a high-pitched squeal of excitement that cut through the night air of Birch Lane like it didn't belong there. Like joy had no business being on this street but showed up anyway. He stepped behind an oak tree across the road, pressed his back against the bark. His heart was beating in his throat. Through the front window he could see shapes moving, small shapes, running toward the door, toward her. "Miss Wendy! Miss Wendy!" The voices carried clear across the empty street. She knelt down, and the shapes became children, arms outstretched, faces bright, every one of them reaching for the woman who had just worked 6 hours cleaning other people's messes so she could bring home other people's food. For them. Garrett didn't move from behind the oak tree. He stood there, bark pressing into his shoulder blades, and watched through the window of a house that should have been condemned. The living room was small, 15 by 12, maybe less. A couch with a blanket thrown over a torn cushion. A bookshelf made from cinder blocks and planks. Mismatched chairs pulled around a table that had been built for 4 but was set for 9. 6 children. He counted them as they moved around the room. The youngest, a girl, maybe 4, clung to Wendy's leg with both arms. A boy around 7 tugged at the canvas bag, trying to help carry it. 2 girls, maybe 9 and 10, were already clearing the table, setting out plates that didn't match and cups that used to be jars. A boy around 12 stood at the kitchen counter filling a plastic pitcher with water from the tap. And a tall boy, 13, maybe 14, stood near the door, arms crossed, watching Wendy with an expression that wasn't childlike at all. Protective, vigilant, like he'd appointed himself her guardian and took the job seriously. In the corner, in two armchairs that had been pushed together to make a kind of love seat, sat two elderly people. A man with a tremor in his hands and a woman with a cane leaning against the armrest. They watched the commotion with the patient stillness of people who had long stopped expecting much from the world, but were grateful for what showed up anyway. Wendy set the bag on the table and unzipped it. The containers came out one by one. Turkey, chicken, bread, fruit, vegetables. She opened each one and the children leaned in. Not grabbing, not fighting. Waiting. They knew the system. She portioned everything. Each plate got the same amount. Protein first, then bread, then fruit, then vegetables. The elderly man's food was cut smaller. His hands shook too much to use a knife. Wendy placed his fork in his right hand and steadied it with her own until he gripped it. The elderly woman got a cup of water with a straw because her wrist couldn't hold the weight of a full glass. The children ate. Not fast, not slow. The way people eat when they've learned that this is the only meal that's guaranteed. Garrett noticed the fridge. It was old, rounded edges, the kind they stopped making decades ago. The door hung slightly open from a broken seal. Inside, empty. One bottle of water, half a jar of peanut butter, nothing else. The food Wendy brought home tonight, the leftovers from the 32nd floor, was dinner, breakfast, possibly lunch. The only groceries in this house came in a canvas bag at midnight. He moved to the side of the house. Another window, a hallway with two doors. The first door was open, a small bedroom with two mattresses on the floor pushed together, covered in quilts that had been washed thin. The children's room, 6 kids, 2 mattresses, no bed frames, no dressers. Clothes folded in stacks along the wall. The second door was the bathroom. A single towel hung over the shower rod. He looked for another bedroom. There wasn't one. Back at the front window, the children were finishing dinner. The youngest girl had climbed into Wendy's lap. Wendy held a picture book, spine cracked, pages soft from use, and read in a low voice that Garrett could barely hear through the glass. The other children gathered around. The tall boy sat on the floor with his back against Wendy's chair, arms still crossed, but his eyes were closed, listening. The elderly man had fallen asleep in his armchair. The woman reached over and pulled a blanket across his legs. One by one, the children drifted toward the bedroom. The 2 older girls took the youngest by the hand. The 7-year-old carried his plate to the sink, without being asked. The 12-year-old checked the lock on the back door. Wendy tucked the youngest into a cot wedged between the 2 mattresses, a cot so small it might have been built for a doll. She pulled the quilt up to the girl's chin. The girl grabbed Wendy's finger and held it. Wendy sat on the edge of the cot and waited, patient, still, like she had nowhere else to be and nothing more important than this. When the girl's grip loosened, Wendy stood, walked back to the living room, folded a thin blanket across the couch. The couch was her bed. Garrett stumbled backward. His heel caught a root and he almost went down. He caught himself on the tree, turned, and walked to his car in the dark. His hands were shaking. His jaw was tight. Something behind his sternum felt like it was cracking open. Not breaking, cracking. The way a wall splits when the foundation shifts beneath it. He sat in the driver's seat for 23 minutes. He knew because he stared at the clock on the dashboard without blinking. The watch on his wrist, a Patek Philippe that cost more than Wendy Ashford would earn in 3 years, caught the light from a distant street lamp. He turned his wrist over so he wouldn't have to look at it. Then he started the engine, pulled off Birch Lane, and drove home in silence. He didn't sleep that night. Not 1 minute. Garrett didn't go to the office the next morning. For the first time in 9 years, he canceled everything. He drove to Millbrook, not to Birch Lane. Not yet. He parked on Dawson Street, 2 blocks east, and walked into a corner store with bars on the windows and a bell above the door that hadn't worked in years. The woman behind the counter, heavy-set, 60s, reading glasses on a chain, looked at him the way Millbrook looked at anyone in a suit. "Help you? I'm looking for information about a woman named Wendy Ashford. Lives on Birch Lane. The woman's face changed. Not suspicious anymore. Something softer. She took off her glasses. You a reporter? No. Social services? No, I want to know her story. The woman studied him for a long moment. Then she called toward the back. Ray, come out here. Ray was her husband, 72, retired postal carrier. He delivered mail on Birch Lane for 31 years. He knew every house, every family, every story that street had ever held. He told Garrett the one that mattered. 12 years ago, Wendy Ashford lived 4 blocks south on Mayhew Street. Small apartment, 2nd floor. She had a husband named Thomas, a mechanic who worked at the tire shop on Route 11, and a son named Eli, 7 years old. Big brown eyes. Always carried a backpack shaped like a dinosaur. Thomas drove a pickup truck with 200,000 miles on it. Every morning he'd drop Eli at school, then head to the shop. Every evening he'd pick Eli up and they'd stop for ice cream on the way home. Strawberry for Eli, vanilla for Thomas. Every single day. On a Tuesday in November, a man in a Dodge Ram ran a red light at 47 miles per hour on the Route 11 overpass. Hit the passenger side of Thomas's truck. Eli was in the passenger seat. Thomas died at the scene. Eli died in the ambulance. Wendy was in the back seat. She survived with a shattered left hip and 3 cracked ribs and a hole in her life that no surgeon could close. Ray paused, took a breath. She disappeared for a while after that, lost the apartment, couldn't work, ended up at the shelter on 5th Avenue. Stayed there about 2 years. Didn't talk to anyone, didn't eat some days. People thought she was done. Then, one winter night, January, bitter cold, Wendy was walking back to the shelter from a food bank when she saw a child sitting on the steps of Grace Lutheran Church. A girl, 3 years old. No coat, no shoes. Shaking so hard her teeth sounded like pebbles in a can. No parent, no note, just a child left on a church step in 12-degree weather. Wendy sat down next to her, took off her own coat and wrapped it around the girl, carried her inside the shelter, fed her crackers and warm water. The girl wouldn't let go of Wendy's hand for 3 days. Something in Wendy woke up. After that, Ray said, she got the job at your building, night shift, started bringing food home, took in the girl, then a boy from down the street whose mother went to prison, then 2 sisters whose father just left one morning and never came back, then the Henderson twins. Their grandmother died and nobody claimed them. And the elderly couple? Earl and Dorothy Price. Their kids moved to the West Coast and stopped calling. Earl had a stroke 2 years ago. Dorothy can barely walk. Wendy moved them in because the alternative was a state facility that had a 6-month wait list. Garrett leaned against the store counter. The fluorescent light above him buzzed. How does she pay for all of it? Ray laughed. Not a happy laugh. She doesn't. She works. She brings home what she can. The church helps sometimes. Food drives, clothing donations. But mostly it's her. $14 an hour and whatever she can carry in that bag. The woman behind the counter spoke up. That woman works all night, comes home, feeds everyone, sleeps 2 hours, takes the kids to school, comes back, cleans the house, sleeps 2 more hours, then goes back to work. Every single day. She looked at Garrett hard. Every single day. Garrett drove back to the city, took the highway, past the Route 11 overpass where Thomas and Eli Ashford died. He didn't know that's what it was, not yet, but he felt the car shudder over a patched section of asphalt and wondered how many lives had changed on this stretch of road without anyone stopping to notice. He pulled into his reserved spot at headquarters, turned off the engine, didn't get out. The parking garage was concrete and fluorescent light. His Tesla sat between a CFO's Mercedes and a VP's Porsche Cayenne. 3 cars worth more than Wendy Ashford's house, her food supply, and 11 years of her salary combined. He thought about the company holiday party last December. $380,000. Open bar, a live band from Nashville, a celebrity DJ after midnight, ice sculptures, lobster towers. The event planner had pitched it as a celebration of our people. Their people. 12,000 employees, and Garrett couldn't name 5 of them below the director level. He tried to do the math in his head. 380,000 divided by Wendy's hourly wage. It came out to more than 27 years. They'd spent 27 years of her labor on one party. One night. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his photos. A yacht trip in June. A ski lodge in Aspen. His daughter's birthday at a restaurant where the tasting menu cost $400 a plate. He'd posted every one of them. Thousands of likes. Comments from people who called him inspiring. Inspiring. A woman 4 miles south was feeding 9 people with food his company threw away, and the internet thought he was inspiring because he ate dinner on a boat. He called his ex-wife. It rang 5 times and went to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. He called his daughter Harper. She picked up on the 3rd ring. "Dad, it's the middle of the day. Everything okay?" "Yeah, I just wanted to hear your voice." "Okay, you sound weird. When's the last time I asked you how you're doing?" "You ask me every time we talk." "No, I mean really asked, like sat down and listened." A pause. "Dad, are you having a midlife crisis?" He almost laughed. "Maybe, I don't know. I think I just realized something." "What?" He looked through the windshield at the elevator doors that would take him to his corner office, his quarterly projections, his Forbes interview follow-up, his life. "I have everything, and I don't do anything with it." Harper was quiet for a moment. "That's actually kind of deep for you." "Thanks. You okay, though? For real?" "Yeah, I think I'm about to be." He hung up, sat there a little longer. The parking garage was empty except for the security guard's sedan by the exit gate. He thought about Wendy's fridge. 1 bottle of water, half a jar of peanut butter. That was it. A $2.3 billion company sat 32 floors above a cafeteria that generated 400 pounds of waste per week. And the woman who cleaned those floors took home what she could carry because it was the only way 9 people in a clapboard house on Birch Lane would eat tonight. He didn't want to write a check. He'd written checks before, galas, fundraisers, tax-deductible donations that looked good in press releases and disappeared into bureaucracies that moved slower than the problems they were built to solve. Checks were how rich people bought the feeling of doing something without actually doing anything. He didn't want the feeling. He wanted the thing. He got out of the car, walked past the elevator, took the stairs. 32 flights. By the time he reached his floor, his legs burned and his shirt was damp, and he felt more awake than he had in years. He sat at his desk, opened his laptop, and started making calls. Not to his accountant, not to his PR team, not to the foundation that bore his name and did whatever foundations do. He called an architect, a lawyer, an operations VP he trusted with his life. He told none of them why. He told the architect first, "I need you to design a house. 8 bedrooms, a commercial-grade kitchen, a study room with desks for at least 10, a garden space, raised beds, wheelchair accessible. And it needs to look like it belongs in the neighborhood. No glass walls, no modern angles. Just a real home." The architect, a woman named Claire Dunham, who designed Garrett's penthouse, looked up from her notepad. "Where?" "Birch Lane, Millbrook." Claire set her pen down. "Garrett, that zip code doesn't get custom builds. The lots are worth less than my drafting table. I bought 2 of them yesterday, through an LLC. The one in the middle already has a house on it. We're building around it, absorbing the existing structure so nobody has to move during construction." "Who's the client?" "A woman named Wendy Ashford." "Who is she?" "She's the reason we're doing this." Claire didn't ask again. The lawyer came next. Garrett sat across from him in a conference room with the door closed and laid it out. "I need a trust, irrevocable, covers property taxes on the new house in perpetuity, utility costs, groceries, $600 a month adjusted for inflation, health insurance for every resident, and I want a college fund for each child currently living there. Full ride, tuition, books, housing, everything, no cap." The lawyer, a careful man named Philip Shaw, who had handled Garrett's corporate structure for 12 years, wrote it all down without expression. Then he looked up. "How many children?" 6, for now." "For now?" "The trust should accommodate up to 12. She might take in more." Philip nodded. "And the benefactor on record?" "Anonymous. I don't want my name on anything." "Garrett." "Her name!" Everything gets her name. The house, the trust, the fund. It's Ashford House. That's the only name that matters. Philip closed his folder. You know this is going to cost. I know what it's going to cost. Do it. The operations VP was a man named Derek Tate. He and Garrett had worked together since the garage days. He was the only person at the company Garrett called a friend.
Garrett told him everything.
The cleaning lady, the leftovers, the bus, Birch Lane, the children, the fridge, the couch. Derek didn't speak for a long time. What do you need from me? The food waste program. I want it restructured. Every cafeteria in every building. All surplus food gets packed, stored, and distributed to community kitchens across the city. Not thrown away, not composted, fed to people. That's a logistics overhaul. We'd need cold storage, transport, partnerships with existing food banks. Then build it. Call it the Leftover Project. Derek raised an eyebrow. The Leftover Project? She asked for leftovers. For 11 years, that's all she asked for. So that's what we call it. Construction started the following Monday. Garrett didn't visit the site. He didn't want to risk Wendy seeing him. Claire sent updates every 3 days. Photos, floor plans, material selections. He approved everything from his office. The house went up in 8 weeks. 8 bedrooms, each with a real bed and a dresser and a window that opened. A kitchen with a 6-burner stove and a double-wide refrigerator and a pantry deep enough to hold 2 weeks of food. A study room with bookshelves, 2 computers, and a long wooden table with 10 chairs. A garden in the back with raised beds, a tool shed, and a swing set that the contractor's crew added on their own time. No charge. They kept the porch, rebuilt it level and strong, but kept the original wood where they could. Sanded it, sealed it, and they kept the sign. Ashford House. Claire repainted it. Same hand-lettered style, same colors, just clearer now. Permanent. During those 8 weeks, Wendy Ashford continued her nightly routine. Bus to work. 6 hours of cleaning. Leftovers packed in the cold storage containers Garrett had ordered. Bus home. Feed everyone. Sleep 2 hours on the couch. She had no idea that 4 blocks away a house was being built with her name on it. She had no idea that her life was about to change, but not as much as his already had. On a Friday evening in October, 8 weeks after Garrett first followed a cleaning lady home, he asked Wendy Ashford to come to his office. She arrived in her cleaning uniform, gray polo, worn sneakers, canvas bag folded under her arm, empty, shift not yet started. She stood in the doorway like she was afraid to step on the carpet. "Sir, they said you wanted to see me." "Come in, please, sit down." She sat on the edge of the chair, back straight, hands in her lap. The posture of a woman who had spent her entire life making herself small in rooms that weren't hers. Garrett sat across from her. Not behind his desk. He'd pulled 2 chairs to the window so they were level, eye to eye. "I need to tell you something. 8 weeks ago, I stayed late. I saw you packing the leftovers in the cafeteria, and I followed you home." Her face went white. She started to stand. "I only took what was being thrown away, sir. I never stole anything, I swear. The approval is in my file from when I started." "Wendy, sit down. You're not in trouble. You've never been in trouble." He took a breath. "What I found at your door is the reason we're having this conversation. Will you take a drive with me?" She didn't ask where, didn't ask why. She followed him to the elevator, through the parking garage, into his car. She sat in the passenger seat with her bag in her lap and didn't say a word for the entire 20-minute drive south. When they turned onto Birch Lane, she leaned forward. Something was different. The street was the same cracked sidewalks, same chain-link fences. But at the end of the block, where her sagging, clapboard house had stood, there was light. Not the dim yellow of her old lamps, real light, warm and steady, pouring from windows that were new and clean and whole. The car stopped. Wendy didn't move. On the porch, a new porch, level and solid, built from the original wood but sanded smooth and sealed against the weather, stood 6 children and 2 elderly people. Derek had brought them over an hour ago. They were waiting. The hand-painted sign hung from the railing. Same letters, same colors, sharper now. Ashford House. "What is this?" Wendy whispered. "It's yours." She opened the car door. Her feet hit the ground and her knees almost buckled. The youngest girl, the one who always grabbed her finger at bedtime, broke from the group and ran down the porch steps. "Miss Wendy! Miss Wendy, come see! I have my own bed!" The other children followed. They surrounded her on the front walk, pulling her hands, talking over each other. Sam, the tall boy, the guardian, stood on the porch with his arms crossed. But his eyes were wet. Wendy walked through the front door. The living room was twice the size of the old one. Real furniture, a bookshelf with actual books, a rug that wasn't hiding a hole in the floor. She walked into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator. Full. Every shelf. Milk, eggs, vegetables, fruit, juice boxes, cheese. Things she hadn't bought in years because every dollar went somewhere else. She pressed both hands against the refrigerator door and sobbed. Not quietly. The sound came from somewhere deep, somewhere that had been sealed shut for 12 years and had just cracked open in a kitchen that smelled like fresh paint and new wood. The children stood in the doorway, silent. Dorothy reached out and placed a hand on Wendy's back. Garrett handed her a folder. She couldn't read it. Her eyes were too blurred. He read it aloud. The trust, the college funds, every child's name spoken out loud in a kitchen on Birch Lane. Healthcare, groceries, everything. Wendy looked at him. Her voice was barely there. Why? He'd rehearsed this moment a dozen times, had a speech prepared. But standing in that kitchen, with 6 children watching and an old man's hands trembling in his lap, the speech didn't matter. Because you asked for leftovers, and you turned them into something the rest of us forgot how to build. 6 months later, Ashford House had a waiting list. Not for the children inside. They were thriving. The oldest girl made honor roll for the first time. The twins joined a soccer league. Caleb, the 7-year-old, told his teacher he wanted to be an architect. When asked why, he said, "Because someone built us a house, and I want to do that for other people." Sam, the tall boy who used to stand guard by the door, got accepted to a summer engineering program at the state university. Full scholarship, funded by the Ashford Trust. He told Wendy on a Tuesday morning over breakfast. She cried into her cereal. He pretended not to notice. Earl and Dorothy had a home aide now. Earl's tremor was being managed by a specialist he'd waited 2 years to see. Dorothy walked the garden every afternoon, checking the tomato cages like they owed her money. Wendy still worked at the company. She refused to quit. Garrett offered 3 times. Each time she said the same thing. "This job gave me my family. I'm not leaving it." So she stayed. Night shift, same gray bun, same worn sneakers, though the children had pooled their allowance and bought her a new pair for Christmas. She wore them once, smiled, and put them in the closet. The old ones still had life in them, she said, but the leftovers had changed. The leftover project had expanded to 14 cities. 2.2 million meals redirected from dumpsters to community kitchens. Corporate partners lined up. The press called it revolutionary. Garrett called it overdue. Every evening, Wendy still packed food in the cafeteria. But now she packed it into labeled containers bound for distribution centers across the city. Same precision. Proteins here, bread there, fruit by ripeness. Some things don't change. Some things shouldn't. On a Thursday night in April, Garrett stayed late. He stood at the glass wall of his office and watched Wendy in the cafeteria below. Humming, working, packing containers for people she'd never meet. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. He turned off his light and went home. Some things don't need a CEO's approval. They just need someone willing to ask for the leftovers. And someone finally willing to listen. If this story made you feel something, drop a comment. What's the smallest act of kindness that changed your life? Share this with someone who needs reminding that good people still exist. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Stories like Wendy's deserve to be told.
11 years, one request, leftovers. That's all Wendy Ashford ever asked for, and she turned it into a lifeline for 9 people no one else remembered. We measure generosity in dollars. Galas, foundations, traced with 6 zeros. That's what the world calls making a difference. Wendy had $14 an hour and a canvas bag. No platform, no audience, no tax write-off, and she built a family from what other people threw away. That's not charity, that's alchemy. Meanwhile, a man running a $2.3 billion company couldn't name the woman mopping his floors. Wealth didn't make him blind, comfort did. The moment he stopped looking away, everything changed, but not just for Wendy, but for him, because sometimes the person you're trying to save is really saving you. So here's what I want you to think about tonight. If everything you have was measured not by what you earn, but by what you give when no one was watching, what would you be worth? And the people you pass every day without seeing, what are they carrying home that you will never know about? Drop your answer in the comments, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe. Next week's story. I still can't believe how it ended.